Servus and welcome to an episode of the Pro Hockey Pod, episode 60. Really flying them out right now. This week we have another guest on who is from the OHL. I think it's a great person to talk to. He's both played in the league and then also been, whether it's an assistant coach, head coach, and now GM. Long time GM in the league, won a lot of awards, I would say, had a lot of successful teams. Very excited to talk to him today, pick his brain about how he builds his teams. Welcome to the Pro Hockey Pod, James Boyd.
Thanks a lot, Andrew.
So I always like to take it back when we start, just kind of where it all started for you. I believe you were born in Midland, Ontario. Like, what's your first childhood memory of growing up in that area?
Well, actually, I spent the bulk of my childhood in Midland, but when I was born, we lived way further north in Ontario in a town called Red Lake, um, which I think at the time was the furthest north you could go on a paved road or some stat like that. But we lived in Red Lake and then spent a couple of years in Espanola, and then kind of moved further south to Midland. My father was an OPP officer, so was transferred kind of further south as we grew older. But Midland's accurate. The bulk of my youth was there, and it was filled with sports. Played every sport. Spent a lot of time outdoors. Those are kind of the first memories. Um, this sports filled childhood.
And what drew you to the sport of hockey? I mean, a lot of guests I have on when they're Canadian, they say, well, it's kind of in our blood. You're skating before you can walk kind of thing. So was it kind of similar for you?
Yeah, it was. I don't know exactly what the transition was, but my dad was a big hockey fan and a player himself, and then all my friends played. When I grew up, there's Midland, Penetang are two towns next to each other in that part of Ontario, and there's quite a rivalry at the time. And some of us went to school in Penetang, played hockey in Midland, and it was a pretty stereotypical Canadian childhood in that way. That it was very competitive, but everyone I knew played hockey and was always around the rink.
Did you have a favorite team or even like a favorite player that you kind of grew up idolizing and tried to, model your game after?
Well, I don't know about modeling my game after, but definitely, and this is actually a link to Espanola, but when I was a kid, I had a chance to go to a Toronto Maple Leafs game, and there was Al Secord was playing for the Chicago Blackhawks, and Al actually is from Espanola, and our dads had a connection, so I got to meet Al Secord at a pregame skate at my old Maple Leaf Gardens. This would have been in the early '80s, and then really nice guy. But then attended the game that night, and for hockey fans of that era, Al Secord was quite a player. He was one of the last players to go without a helmet. He was a league penalty minute leader, but also a 50 goal guy. So he was an exciting. This nice guy in the morning kind of morphed into a madman in the game, and so I became a big Blackhawks fan. As a kid, I liked the logo, and but I really liked Al Secord, and then kind of came to appreciate that type of player, a player who has a lot of tools in their toolbox. It would be the modern terminology for it, I think, but a real leader and a player that had an impact on the game in a whole bunch of different ways.
No, that's definitely fair. You brought up Maple Leaf Gardens. I mean, I was only there once as a kid. Unfortunately, I'm too young to really remember it, but I've heard that building was just something special to see. Especially seeing an original six game like you got to see there with the Blackhawks in town. Lots of history there. What when you were growing up there, like in the Midland area, like what was kind of like your minor hockey path? Like did they have like AAA and all that back then, or was it a little different for your small area?
No, there was no AAA in that area at the time. I know, more recently we've got a couple teams. Barrie has a AAA center, and North Central Predators. Some of the kids from Midland, Penetang area, they played for North Central now. But at that time there was no AAA. So it was Barrie, I think even was a AA center, but you played in your town. A couple of years older than me. I have an older brother though, and Jason Arnott played in Wasaga Beach and dominated the league. Until he was an early teen and went off to play somewhere else. But it was you played in your town, and that was the landscape at that time. Junior C was a pathway for a lot of the players. When they finished their minor hockey years and kind of the high school years, they transitioned into junior C and then tier two junior A. In Aurelia or Barrie, it's kind of the pathway there.
Yeah, and you yourself, you went to the St. Michael's Buzzers. I believe like the league, like if for us who know it today, it would be what the OJHL is now, if I know that correctly. But you end up getting drafted from there to the OHL at 17 years old. Like, had you thought at that point about pursuing, whether it was major, junior, or even maybe the NCAA route, or were you just kind of playing junior to, get to the next level and keep improving your game?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a different process at the time because it was a 17-year-old draft. So players were drafted a year later than they are now. But there was an opportunity to play in the league if you were drafted in the first three rounds, I believe. So teams would, maybe have a couple 16-year-olds, but the majority of 16-year-olds weren't drafted. So you play a year of, U18 or midget hockey at the time, or you play junior and then, get drafted from there. So yeah, I always wanted to play in the OHL. And but wasn't drafted in that first year as a 16-year-old. So yeah, we were looking at. I wanted to continue my hockey. That St. Mike's Buzzers team played in what was called the Metro Junior A League, which was actually a unique league at the time, really, really competitive league. And fans of the OHL now would recognize Stan Butler's powerhouse Wexford teams. That feature the Anson Carters and a number of other NHL players. But that league was really, really competitive. So the majority of the players on our St. Mike's team and probably the Wexford team ended up with NCAA scholarships. It was an older league. There was a couple players, younger players in the league that transitioned to the OHL, and I was one of them. But there was the goal was to continue playing hockey at the highest level that I could.
It's always interesting, like asking people about that because I feel like, especially back when you were growing up, like the OHL, at least in my childhood, was like the route you go, and there wasn't much talk about NCAA. I grew up in Peterborough, so obviously we had the Petes there. That's what you do on Thursday nights, and
Yeah,
um, you end up making the jump there, as you mentioned, at 17 years old to Kitchener. Um, how was that adjustment for you going at 17, 18 years old?
it was a big jump. It was a big jump. Even going from a competitive junior A loop where played a important part on a junior A team there with the Buzzers, and we'd lost in the league final to Wexford, the previous season, but it was a big jump. It took a while to get acclimatized to the league. We had a pretty good team in Kitchener. That was extremely competitive. The Western Conference at that time. So, but it was great. Strong fan base there. Good team. Joe McDonnell was our coach, who's now the director of scouting in Dallas, and worked with the Detroit Red Wings for a long time in the 90s and in 2000. So Joe knows what he's doing, obviously. So got some excellent coaching, and it was a good first year.
One other cool place I like just as a kid, it just comes to my mind is the Belleville Bulls, like that logo, going to games there and seeing that bull head on the wall there. I don't know if it was there yet when you were there, but I remember growing up and obviously the 96 year, like for me growing up in Peterborough, the Petes had the Mem Cup that year, good teams, but I remember so many battles with Belleville. They did shed some blood in those days, but how was it playing in Belleville there? Like I believe when they were there, like it was always a competitive junior market. Like even after my time in Peterborough, like I think they had a couple of years there where they went to the finals or almost the Mem Cup.
Yeah, it was great. Very unique in a number of ways in Belleville at that time because, in contrast to Kitchener, which was, city-owned team, but more of a corporate environment. Belleville was owned by a family. So the Vaughn family owned team. Dr. Vaughn, um, was the sole owner, and it really was, a family-run team. It was you were playing in a smaller center, and it was very close knit. It was a great place, but really unique that we played on Olympic ice. So
Yeah.
since then, the arena in Belleville has been, modified for the American Hockey League. It has an NHL surface, but we played on Olympic size ice. So you can imagine, the contrast with Peterborough, which I don't even think is NHL
The,
size,
the square boards.
square corners. And yeah, so Peter, the teams were built very differently. And, even when I was coaching in Belleville, Peterborough always had big defense and a team that complemented their ice surface. Where in Belleville we had some smaller, skilled players that could really operate on the big ice. And you really saw the philosophy, the team build philosophy there, which worked for both teams. Obviously the ebb and flow and the cycle of junior hockey, but very unique. Having those two teams close together and competitive at the same time. It was a lot of fun.
I remember playing minor hockey there in Peterborough, and we would always go play the Quinty Red Devils there, and we sometimes got to play on that rink. And as a 10-year-old, that thing seems like the moon because it was
Yeah.
so big, the
Yeah.
ice surface. That's funny though. That makes me remember it. One other thing I want to talk to you about, which I think is interesting, like your decision. So you end up playing 4 years in the OHL. You played two playoff games, I believe, for the Fort Worth Fire. But after that, like, a lot of young kids like yourself have a choice to make. Do you go to school? Do you try to go the pro route? Like, had you always set your sights on, I want to go to school and work on my education, or had you also thought about, hey, maybe I can give this pro route a try as well?
Yeah, well, I think I got a little taste of it there following my overage season. So I played as a 20-year-old in the OHL and then had an opportunity to play, go down and play with the Fort Worth Fire, which we ended up winning a championship actually. So I was a spare part on a Central Hockey League championship team, which was a powerhouse team, like really good team. Most of the players had played in the old Colonial Hockey League in Thunder Bay, and they, you know, transferred down to Fort Worth as a group with their coach Bill McDonald. So kind of a legendary team, and I got a chance to get a taste of that and see how that league operates and the style of play, and it kind of really helped me make a decision that hey, I should probably go to school here for a couple of years and get a degree, and then hopefully come back, and start a professional career at some level. So I had the opportunity to go to the University of Guelph. Powerhouse teams there at the time. Marlon Muellert, head coach, that won a national championship in 96, 97, and the bulk of that team returning. So we had really, really strong teams there, really strong team culture, like a culture of excellence. It was great. And so, I was attracted to that group. There was a couple of guys from Belleville who were playing on the team at the time. And so, I end up at school, and then, when school finished, I was still focused on, starting pro career somewhere. But the opportunity came up in Belleville, and I had a close relationship with the Vaughn family, who I'd mentioned, and yeah, Lou Crawford was the head coach of the famous Crawford family, and so I had to make a quick decision. This is a pretty good opportunity. Maybe I'll do this for a year or two and then go to grad school. That's what I told my mom. But here we are, 20 something years later. It's just one year's turned into another. But it's been a wild ride. It's been great.
And how was that adjustment for you? Like you mentioned, you had to make a decision quickly on whether to keep playing hockey or jump to the coaching side. Obviously, someone who's done it as well, it's once you get on the other side, you realize how good, the playing side was and stuff. But how was the adjustment for you? And were you able to learn on the fly quickly?
Yeah, I feel, well, there's a couple of components to it. The first is at that time in the OHL, the OHL is really, developed over, since the year 2000 or year 99, whenever I had my first year behind the bench, but it wasn't a full-time job. It was being an assistant coach in the OHL. I think league wide was a part-time job. So I coached, but I also did a number of other things to supplement your income. And so that was part of the decision. Was a little bit of a different decision than maybe some of the coaches have today, where you're transitioning into a full-time role. But the fact that I had some connections in the community there, and it worked out really well. But you know quickly after accepting that role, I realized I really don't know what I'm doing here. You know, so I feel bad for Lou Crawford. Who I who I still I'm in touch with to this day. But he inherited an assistant coach who, Lou kind of has a PhD in hockey growing up. His brother Mark was coaching the Colorado Avalanche to the Stanley Cup at that time. Lou had played in the NHL, played in the American League. Lou's brother Bobby had played for the Hartford Whalers in the NHL, and was running a hockey program in Connecticut. And I was kind of realized quickly that I better start asking questions and better start observing here, because I had a sharp learning curve. We were fortunate though; we had a really good team, really good team. So working with the defense there, I had Branislav Meze, who was the 10th overall pick to the Florida Panthers, who played half an hour. So that makes, things a little bit easier. And they had that championship residue from the year before. So a hardworking group, great group of guys. Um, and, I learned on the fly and learned quickly and immersed myself in, coaching clinics and talked to people I knew in the game, watch closely how the other teams operate and kind of, gained as much knowledge as I could and really, watch Lou operate. And the following year, he went to coach the Baby Leafs in St. John's, Newfoundland. So it was a valuable year, and a lot of experience was gained. But like I said, the learning curve was steep.
Yeah, you're kind of thrown into the fire, and especially when, maybe yourself, if you don't feel ready, then it's, you're learning on the fly. And one thing I thought was cool about that story is, you mentioned obviously when you started as an assistant coach back then in the OHL, it's not a full-time paying job, which means you got to find other ways to make ends meet. And I think that might also prepare you. And when you look back, you go, hey, that really prepared me and got me ready for hard work. So now what I do, it's a passion working in hockey. I think everyone says they don't work a day in their life, even though it's long hours. But it sounds like Lou kind of took you under his wing, whether he wanted to or not, and tried to
Yeah,
speed you up on your learning. But you ended up spending a couple more years there as the assistant coach, and then you ended up getting promoted to the head coach in Belleville in the 03-04. When you were promoted, did you feel after those 4 years of being an assistant that you were fully ready to take on the head coaching job?
yeah, I was excited to do so too. And we'd had good teams really from the time that I arrived there in '99 to 2004, and so we had added to our team and kind of depleted the cupboards of draft choices and things. It was kind of by design. But by the time, the opportunity came, it was really a rebuilding year. So it was a year of, developing young players. We certainly weren't on track to win any championships that year. The goal was to, have a good start and maybe make the playoffs, which we didn't. But it was different type of pressure. It wasn't jumping into a team that had great expectations. And during the year, also dealing with the team went up for sale around Christmas time and was sold at the end of the year. So I got a real taste of coaching there with some uncertainty about who's going to own the team. Will you have a job? What does the future hold? So kind of grappling with that at the same time. But again, it was a lot of valuable experience gained there.
And after Belleville, you went to Toronto St. Michael's Majors there in the OHL, and you started to do what you kind of trended to do for, up until now for most of your career was, dueling in two positions, at least on Elite Prospects, it says that like you were an assistant coach and also you were the assistant director of hockey ops. So assistant coach, I think we know like what your responsibilities were, but what was your responsibility as assistant director of hockey ops for those who don't know?
Well, I think more, working with the head coach and general manager, but taking on some additional administrative stuff. Having a hand in some of the scouting, definitely not the director of scouting, but working closer with the scouts to recognize who the prospects are and, doing some background on the draft, taking on some more administrative stuff that's not glamorous in the hockey world, planning travel and for players and the team and that sort of thing, and doing some long-term planning. So it was just taking on more, responsibility within the organization. And at that time, St. Mike's was a smaller staff. We played out of the little St. Mike's Arena there, where actually I played for the Buzzers in Junior A, so I was familiar with that. But it was just a chance to gain more opportunity, and I had a chance there to work with Bud Stefanski, who had coached in Barrie, won a league championship shortly before that. So Bud has a wealth of experience, coaching and had some success. So I got it was a chance to build my knowledge and kind of expand my resume there.
And you continued to expand your resume there too because you eventually got promoted to assistant GM, which, again is like you mentioned, working with both the head coach and also the general manager and a little more on your plate, I would say. When you were doing this, like I always wonder, it's hard, like being a full-time coach is hard enough. Like, there's a lot of responsibility, a lot of hours go into it, but now you've taken on something on the administrative side as well as team building side. Like, how did you find the time to, juggle both of them, I would say, or switch, put one hat on and take the other one off, or were you just kind of both hats on at the same time and, taking
Yeah.
the tasks as they came?
Well, I think it's taking the tasks as they can. You try to plan it. You try to plan your time, manage your time, as efficiently as you can. But there's always curveballs. There's always something that comes up that's going to derail you from what you had intended to do that day. And when you're working in junior hockey too, you've got some additional responsibilities. You got schooling. You've got the billet situation, players living in homes, transportation for the players, especially in Toronto at St. Mike's, a little bit different. For players to get around, especially players who may be living in the city for the first time. So, uh, you plan as well as you can, but you got to be flexible and you got to be ready um, for whatever's coming your way. But that was really, you kind of touched on it. That's really been kind of the way my career, not by design, but I've taken on more responsibility, each year. And sometimes that was a little bit, just a little bit, and sometimes it was a lot. But I try to expand my role and responsibilities and get some new experiences all the time. And eventually, you end up as a coach and a manager, and that's when it becomes really difficult to juggle your time. And the whole key there is you need a strong staff. You need to totally be able to trust your scouting staff. You need to have excellent assistant coaches. You need to have a really strong support group because that's for myself doing both at the same time. That's a really difficult job.
I'm gonna come back to that in a second because you just raised a really good point, which I want to talk about. One more thing I want to talk about with the same mics there is the 2010, 2011 season. So you guys hosted the Mem Cup that year in Mississauga, went
Right.
all the way to the finals. A buddy of mine, Brett Fleming, was on your team. We grew up together. He was a year younger in Burlington, trained together for years, and I remember watching that tournament. Your first, I would say, like hosting a tournament like that is crazy in itself, and then obviously making it to the finals. Like, do you want to just touch on that full experience for you?
Yeah, sure. Is hosting Memorial Cup's an endeavor. So the entire year, you've got to build up to assembling your team and planning to have a successful season in the year that you're going to be bidding. And then, of course, there's the hosting that comes, which involves logistics and planning. And we had phenomenal staff there. Mr. Duncan Stoth was our team president, who actually ended up going on to in Oshawa. They won a Memorial Cup in Oshawa when Duncan was on staff there. But kind of the master at pulling that all together. But we had our team at that time. Dave Cameron was our head coach. I was Dave's assistant coach, but Dave was coaching the World Junior team at the same time. So that was going on as well during the year. But we had a phenomenal season. We had a very strong team, great group. We had some really versatile players. Brett Fleming being one of them, could play forward and defense kind of equally well. Was drafted to Washington. Um, physical, great. I really like that team. That's one of the favorite teams. Um, they had a chance to coach because could kind of play it any way you want. And we came, there's the fine margin. There's no season, where the margin is so slim. Where we lost in Game 7 of the OHL final in overtime to the Owen Sound Attack. The young Jordan Binnington, putting in an unbelievable performance. And then we lost in the final game of the Memorial Cup to St. John's. Jonathan Huberto, I think, scored the game winner in that one. But I think it was ended with an empty netter, but really a one-goal game. So, it was a season of a lot of success, but just came up short, and that was tough to take. But there was a lot going on that season. It was a busy time around the arena there in Mississauga for sure.
Uh, Touch on Brett Fleming. I've never met somebody who loved running so much as that guy. Anytime we do like a sprint test or a long distance test, this guy would blow by us for miles. Another guy I remembered being on the team now is actually a Peterborough guy, Mark Canton. I believe he was on your team. I think it was that year as well. But yeah, I remember that team. There was a lot of guys. I believe, if I remember correctly, was Chris D'Souza there when was that
That's
the year?
correct. Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
he's
Christy Caesar was there.
He's in our in Munich right now, so we I see him a lot, obviously on Munich there. You
Right.
guys have a
We
stacked roster,
we actually another connection to Germany, but we made a big trade with Windsor. Windsor won the Memorial Cup the year before, and we acquired Mark Canton, of course, Peterborough native, the rugged defenseman, really good player, and Justin Shug from
right?
Windsor. So Shuggy was a frontline goal scoring player for us, and I know he played in Germany for a period of time too.
Believe it was
Uh,
also Munich.
there you go, there you go. Yeah. So yeah, there's another example of those guys on the team that were really really good players.
Yeah, you guys had a good roster that year. But as you said, you guys built up that year and obviously made trades and were building for that year for hosting. After that season, you end up getting promoted to both the GM and head coach. And this is what you were talking about before. And I kind of wanted to ask you, like, as a head coach, you have full responsibility of, the day-to-day stuff with practice, coaching, everything like that. And then as a GM, it's anything from scouting to building a roster, future stuff, draft picks, you name it. Like, how did you find the time to balance that? Or as you mentioned, was it more like you would delegate, certain things to whether it's scouts or other staff members that you felt like you could trust? Because you can't, as you mentioned, you can't be, four places at once.
Yeah, it's more delegating. It's more having staff that you can trust, and then being able to turn things over and allow people to own that specific area, whether it's your director of scouting or your assistant coaches or even your equipment manager. Um, you need to be able to trust people to do their jobs. So you got to find the right people, and then you got to. But it was difficult. It became more difficult. We had my children are 13 and 10 now, but right around that time in Mississauga, it was going pretty smoothly. And then, when you end up with a couple toddlers at home, they get, time becomes a premium. So that's when it became a little bit more difficult. Just, the life gets in the way a little bit. So but you have to trust people, but you also have to manage your time really well. There's a lot of things that are time intensive. There's dealing with player agents, dealing with NHL teams on development, dealing with, like I said, schooling. You've got players in high school, you got players in post-secondary. So we got university students, we got high school students, we got European players in Canada for the first time. In order to um, set the table for everyone to have success, it's a full-time job in itself. And then you got the coaching on top of it, and the delegation of ice time, and the player development on top. It's busy, really busy.
When it came to scouting, would you, as you mentioned, put a lot of trust in your scouts, your director of scouting, and then if they were to bring players to you that they felt, would fit what your team was looking for, would that then be like, okay, now I'll go see them live and then I'll end up making, yeah, I agree with my scout here, or no, it's not exactly what we're looking for? Is that how you would kind of do just because of the time consumption?
Um, yeah, a little bit. I think you need to really trust your scouts, and especially if you're coaching at the same time. Um, you know, if you're interested in a scout who's seen a player 10 or 15 times, and I'm really the belief you can't go out and watch them once and make a decision on the player. You really got to trust what they're doing. I just love watching hockey, right? That's where the scouting really comes in for me. I love watching hockey. My day off, I watch hockey at all levels, and I just really enjoy it. So I like to have a handle on who are the players. You never know what's happening down the road. There's always players change teams. You watch players development. You watch the hockey landscape. So I like watching. Have a good idea of what the pool of players is like in each age group. Throughout our league, but uh, and there has to be a consensus when you're picking your first or second round pick. There's a little bit more that goes into it. Sometimes there's a recruiting element to it. Sometimes you got a player on the other side of the province that's going to be further from home, requires a little more in-depth conversation. I, so I think you need to get involved, but I think you got to trust the scouts.
One other thing I wanted to ask you about in terms of it's kind of like new. I don't know if it's official yet. I mean, you might not be able to speak on it, but the whole thing now of OHL players being able to commit to NCAA after. I'm not sure if that's official. I saw that one player had verbally committed, whether true or not. But Like, what's your take on that? Like, is that something that you wished, existed back when you played, or like even when I played? Because we had to make that decision. It's either you're going this route or that route.
Yeah, no, that's not official. There's a player from the Regina Pats who is committed to Arizona State University, who's an American player. The rules don't permit for that yet. Whether those rules change, I'm not sure.
Mm.
There's people higher up at the league that are on top of that one. But I was fortunate to play Canadian university hockey on a really good team, and that's where we have a lot of players that transition to youth sports, and that is a high level of hockey as well. So I think players deserve to have all the options available, and it's up to the player to maintain their academic standing and not eliminate themselves for an opportunity. But the players that are eligible, they should be able to continue their hockey career, and have everything available to them. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think it's probably only a matter of time.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens there. But back to your career here. Um, you did the GM head coach job for a while, and then I believe your last year in Mississauga, when they changed the name to Steelheads, you switched to just the general manager, so full-time general manager. I was curious here. I noticed after this season, so the 16-17 season, you end up switching to Ottawa there. I believe, if my facts are correct, that last year in Mississauga, you guys ended up going to the OHL final. Like, what brought on the switch? Like, was it just, you wanted to try something new after being so long? I believe you were 13 years, if I remember correctly, with Mississauga
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah, it was a little bit. It wasn't just one thing. It was a little bit. I've been there for a long time. The We lost in the finals to the Erie Otters that year. We had an excellent season, but that was the first season where I was focused solely on GM duties. So it was the first year that I wasn't coaching. James Richmond took over, did a great job with our team. I was looking to transition to possibly a professional scouting job at the time. There was some uncertainty in Mississauga then, which is public knowledge about the whether the team was going to remain in Mississauga. There's a chance that maybe the team would be relocated as those discussions went on. So I just thought, this might be the right time to, with a young family to explore, what else is going on in the hockey world. So it was amicable. Elliot Kerr, the owner of the team there, still to this day, we're still close. But as I was, kind of pursuing other opportunities, Ottawa called and, expressed an interest in speaking about their vacant GM position, which morphed into a bigger conversation and about the 67s. And I played for the 67s in 94, 95, so I had a connection to the team there. And then through that process, I learned that my friend Andre Tourigny was possibly going to be available to coach the team. So it escalated quickly from there, and it turned into just a great situation. So I transitioned there, of course, for the following season, and it was a smooth transition, and Ottawa's been great.
Yeah, I've been to a couple games there in Ottawa. Like, that building is great for junior hockey, and the city really comes around their team. I believe they hosted the Mem Cup at one point. I went there. I think it was them and Calgary Hitmen in the final, if I remember back in the 90s there. But another thing I thought was very cool, you make this transition to Ottawa and you end up winning I believe the GM of the year award, if I'm saying that correctly there. Um Looking back, winning this award, getting the ceremony, getting this trophy. I mean, it might have been during COVID, so maybe there wasn't a ceremony. I don't know, but um, looking
Yeah.
back, getting this award, like, did you just kind of take a moment to reflect and be like, wow, like, crazy where this, game has taken me, where this journey?
Yeah. It was kind of during, at the start of COVID. So it was a really weird time. The award didn't exist. That was the first year. So that was
Yeah.
the inaugural award. So it wasn't like I was trying to win the award. The award kind of materialized, and but it definitely meant a lot. I know I had a lot of respect for Jim Gregory. It's a Jim Gregory Award, and so the fact that it's it's the GM of the year in the OHL, but also it's associated with someone who's had, a massive impact on hockey and someone who, just exhibited class at every step of the way and had the respect of so many people. It meant a lot for sure.
I mean, anytime you can win an award like that, I think it's awesome to have on your resume and obviously well deserved. Um, got a couple questions about kind of your philosophies on hockey and like kind of roster construction. What types of players would you say you're trying to build there, like the rosters to build in Ottawa, players you like to recruit, and how you like to build your teams?
Yeah, well, junior hockey is extremely difficult. I'm going to start out with saying that, the 16-year-old, 15, 16-year-old, 17-year-old teens, there's so much development that happens during that time. So a lot of the time when, we're bringing players into the organization, they grow, they don't grow. Some of them mature later on, some of them, and this is all stuff that's out of their control. It's so we're navigating that landscape too, but we're looking to bring in the best hockey players and then work with those players over a long period of time, 3 or 4 years. And our goal is at the end of those 3 or 4 years that they're going to be in the best position to seize whatever opportunity comes their way. For some of the players, it's going straight to the NHL. For some of the players, it's the American League. For some, it's a youth sports career. But the way we design our program is we don't want anyone that leaves and has regrets about maybe I should have done this or maybe I wish that this um, was available to me. We try to eliminate all the excuses, and then we work on a day to day and to develop those players. And usually, by focusing on the individual player development, then the franchise ends up in a better position over the long term, and that's worked really well for us. So we're into the philosophy over big, small, fast. We try to draft the best players and then work with those players and develop them. And sometimes that changes. Sometimes the player turns out to be an excellent player, and it's not what you thought it was, at the time you drafted them.
Yeah, I think that's all part of it. Do you have a like team core values that you try to instill every year in Ottawa? Like for example, here in Manheim, like Dallas, like one of the quotes we have in our room is do right. If you can do right every day, whether that's compete, being positive, hard work, whatever it is, you know, it it's what we want here in Manheim. Like, do you have similar things you have in Ottawa?
Yeah, we do. We have our team. We have our core values, and really, it's directly from our ownership. That, we're gonna be more than a hockey team. So we have a really strong emphasis on academics, and for the last 6 years that we've had a player that took home a league academic award, which we're really proud of. We have full-time academics. Eileen Duffin handles our academics. So she's a member of our coaching staff, right? Eileen's built into our coaching staff. She communicates with the players in the school and the parents and shepherds those players through their kind of academic career. So that's a non-negotiable, from our owners. So we take great pride in that. And then we're also a community team. So our team last year did over 600 hours of community service during the year. And, you know, our team is, in addition to hockey, we want to set a good example for, young people or anyone who's interested in sports in Ottawa. So uh, that's in addition to, the daily schedule of school and practice and that sort of thing. But because of these core values of teamwork also and being proactive, um, our players, have a framework, a solid framework, and our fans have really embraced that. I think that we're a different team in some ways. Every team's different, but we know what we stand for and we know what we're working towards. And Dave Cameron and their coaching staff does a great job every day of reinforcing that first. Is there's a proper way to do things, and you're going to end up where you deserve to be. And it's a process driven. I know that's the buzzword now, but it's process driven, and we really believe in that. You plan your work and you work your plan.
You just brought up your coaching staff, and that's a great transition to my next question. Like, how do you, as the general manager, pick your coaching staff? Like, what are qualities or things you look for when, you're doing interviews when you have a vacant position?
Yeah, well, we've had some turnover in our coaching staff. We of course had Andre Tourney, who's now in Utah, Arizona, then Utah, in the NHL, and Mario Duhamel, who was our assistant coach, associate coach, who went to the NHL with Andre. And then we've got so we hired Dave Cameron, of course, who came in, who I've got the relationship with, but Dave was coaching in Vienna in Austria, and so we repatriated Dave to the capital. He's of course coached the Ottawa Senators, and was close to the region there. So we've had some excellent coaching, but what we're looking for, I'll start with the head coach. We're looking for a certain level of experience. For our team, we need someone who's got a proven track record and has experience at all levels. And there's a tactical component to it. Having the right players on the ice and the in-game strategy and that sort of thing. But more so, we're looking as a player development. We need a teacher, right? We need someone who can communicate. We need someone who's adaptable to not only processes and developments in the game, but is cool under fire. They can handle adversity and keep the team on track. And they need good judgment, and they need to build a culture that supports long-term development. So that's the physical fitness, the skills development. It all has to be intertwined and meshed together, and all those pieces have to work together. So that players can develop over a long period of time. And so that's someone's got to drive the culture. That's what we're looking for. And the final thing is we need someone who shows that they care about the players and their well-being, and not only the players, everyone in the organization. And everyone has to know that. So it's we're looking for specific, in addition to the technical tactical, that's part of it, but really we're looking for someone who's going to drive the culture of our organization.
No, I feel like that's where it's trended, I would say, over the past like 10, 15 years. Like as you mentioned, like maybe when we were coming up through the ranks there, it was tactics, 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 but the other side of it is actually where you mentioned like you guys take great pride there in developing your players and both as athletes and students.
Yeah.
And you need someone who's going to drive that message and be a good communicator, which is obviously important today because if they can't communicate with the younger generation, as you know, every 5 years it's changing a little bit with the younger generation there. And if they can't communicate with them, then they can't properly, learn from what they're trying to teach, trying to emphasize.
Yeah.
Um,
Just to add on that, one of the key things, is I find that successful coaches, as I watch the hockey landscape, whether it's the NHL or junior or anywhere else, is they have to have boundless energy. They have to be an unstoppable force of energy because they can't get worn down during the season. So yeah, the season is long, and especially in junior, you got all these other elements to support the players and things that are happening, and the head coach has to stay on top of it. The head coach has to address issues. The head coach has to provide the support, and so you need someone with a ton of energy that on a day to day is going to bring that same enthusiasm, the same energy, and then those guys are rare.
a lot of coffee, I would assume, in some of them, because when you guys
Right.
are playing 68 games and, a lot of times you're playing three in a weekend or whatever it is, 3 and 4 days, it's a lot if I remember correctly. You've been very gracious with your time today. I really appreciate it. I got one more for you. I always like to end on this one. What is one piece of advice or multiple pieces of advice you would give the younger generation?
Younger generation, based on my experience, and I'm gonna tailor this a little bit more. I'm gonna talk to my former self, and I say one of the really important things is develop a short memory. You can't dwell on things that have happened, good or bad. Every day is a new day and a new opportunity, and you really have to, have a short memory and approach each day as a clean slate, in a chance to improve. Um, Another one that's really been amplified, I find in recent years, is don't compare yourself to your peers. Every situation is different, every team is different. I find players get bogged down when my best buddy's playing for Team X and he's on the power play and I'm not on the power play here. And no, you got to focus on your development, focus on being a trusted player, a good player on your team, and improving every day. And then you'll end up where you deserve to be. But I know they get bombarded with information now. There's so much out there, and just focus on what you're doing in your situation is probably good advice. And then the last part that really applies to me, which I've learned as I get older in life, is take the opportunity to get some proper rest. There's a is it's important. It's I know sports science now takes puts in place a lot of importance on it, but these players, they have a social life, they have a hockey life, they have a school life, and some of them are trying to do it all. And when you get a time to rest and recuperate, get a solid night's sleep, take care of your body, and that'll help you grow as a player and a person.
Last one's very true. You know, the saying, rest is a weapon, even at the young ages
Like,
of your athletes. Like, so
yeah, I like that one a lot. That's probably something I didn't maybe appreciate or learn until later in life. So if there's advice to former self, would be get some rest.
should have been in bed earlier.
Exactly.
Thank you again. I really appreciate you doing this. It was awesome to pick your brain. Obviously, someone like yourself who has so much experience in both the coaching and now general manager world. I know you guys are starting your season this weekend. I wish you guys the best of luck. I'll be following along, and hopefully we can stay in touch here.
Thanks very much, Andrew.
For those listening, until next week, cheers and ciao.